Good morning again. All right. If you have one of those bulletins, you might notice something a little bit new in there. We took out the order of worship, and the song leaders are just going to have their own portion. That's also going to be on the table in the back, so you can have, if you still want to have all the songs listed, grab that. What we did with the bulletin is I put some sermon notes in there. It's on the second page when you open it up. So, if you want to follow along, keep some sermon notes in there or whatever. That's in the bulletin now. So, just wanted to get that out there. When we take a look at our theme passage for this quarter and what we're talking about, back to this, I told you we'd probably revisit this a few times during this quarter, this fight quarter. This is where Paul says in Ephesians 6:12, he says, For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Emphasis on the struggle there, because that's what it is. Now, interestingly, that word for struggle that he uses there is the only time that word is used inside the New Testament. It is this Greek word pale, P-A-L-E, pale. And the word conveys this idea of an engagement in a challenging contest. The word for struggle there. That's the word he uses to describe what we are up against. The fight, as we're calling it, against spiritual forces of wickedness. It is a parley. It is challenging. It is a contest. It is something that we wrestle with. Some people call it spiritual warfare. And I think that is maybe a little bit more appropriate, because when we're talking about the reality of discipleship, to use that again, that's what we're talking about. This all-out war for our spirituality. You may not realize that, but this is kind of a big deal. It's pretty serious. Okay? It is no light thing. This fight that goes on in the life of Christians against forces that are spiritual, wicked, not human even. One writer called it the daily onslaughts of Satan and his demonic hosts. That is a very serious struggle. And one of the biggest areas that where we can struggle and where this fight within discipleship becomes real is when we sometimes struggle with going back to something that we once knew. Okay, something in the past. As you read through Ephesians, you will find 4 times in chapter 2, 1 time in chapter 4, and 1 time in chapter 5, Paul using this word former or formerly. Okay? And every time he uses that word, he is describing a time when these people that he is writing to lived a life that was separate and apart from God. And throughout, he kind of reminds them of this former lifestyle that they used to live. Like they're Christians now, but hey, they had a past. Just like some people today, whenever they become Christians and they're converted, a lot of people, they come out of a previous kind of life. They have past lives, previous lives where that they led that were completely and totally void of God. And so they have a former manner of living. So this week, I want to build off of some of what we had talked about last week, some of those thoughts as to where this spiritual fight shows up. Last week we talked about the fight to walk worthy. This week we're going to kind of keep that same theme. Now we're going to talk about the fight to never go back. The fight to never go back. We'll be in the same chapter, Ephesians chapter 4. When we're talking about the fight to never go back, we are talking about not going back to a former way of life. not going back to ways in which we used to live, and especially ways in which we used to think. Paul addresses this in that same chapter, and I believe he kind of gives us a solution for how we make sure that doesn't happen. I think we can gather a little bit in this chapter that will help keep us moving forward. Help keep us moving forward to where we never go back to the kind of lifestyle that is completely void of God, or places or mindsets, mentalities that we don't need to have. I think he kind of gives us a solution. Now, as he talks, after he talks about what we had gone over last week in the first 3 verses, he gets into verses 4 through 16. Okay, and that's where he really just talks about the roles of the apostles and the prophets and the evangelists and the shepherds and the teachers, and all the purpose for all of those things, which essentially is it's meant to strengthen the church and build up the church in the proper way, because everything functions well when it's done together and in the right way. That's kind of what he says in those verses. But then he says, you'll notice, look at verse 17. If you look at verse 17, he says, therefore. Well, that's kind of a summary term, actually. Therefore, meaning because of all of that we are supposed to be working toward in the church, and since that's what we are supposed to be shooting for, this I say, and testify in the Lord, that you walk no longer just as Gentiles also walk, in the futility of their mind, being darkened in their understanding, being darkened in their mind, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their hearts. So he's saying, okay, because of what and where our focus really needs to be, you don't need to be walking like that. You don't need to walk and think anymore how Gentiles walk and think. That's what he's saying. But the truth is, sometimes that's easier said than done. That's easier said than done. To where the fight to not go back to that, to not go back to a lifestyle or habits or ways in which you used to think, is sometimes a difficult challenge for people. Very hard. So, what does Paul say as to how to keep that from happening? Well, if you just look at it again, and you include verse 19, don't walk like Gentiles anymore. Don't be darkened in your mind. Don't alienate yourself due to ignorance and a hard heart. Don't become callous. Don't become numb and unfazed because of all the sensuality and all kinds of practices of impurity and greediness. Don't walk like that. Don't walk in the futility and emptiness of your mind. Why? Because you did not learn Christ like that. But you did not learn Christ in this way. So he's telling them, look, don't walk like that, because that's not what you learned when you were learning about how to become a Christian. That is not how you learned about Jesus, and therefore you shouldn't have those things about you now as you try to live like Jesus. You don't need to walk like that anymore. So I think what he shows us here is that in this fight to never go back, and in order to keep from doing that and what will keep us moving forward, I think really it just comes down to this: keep learning Christ. Keep learning Christ. Right? I mean, I think that's the overarching umbrella to all of this in here. How we make sure that we don't walk like the Gentiles or go back to this kind, the kind of ways that were in our past is we keep learning more about Jesus. You learn more about Christ. Now, I think there's several ways that we can do that he says right here in the text that we can draw from. How can we keep learning Christ? What is it that keeps us moving forward? Well, here's one thing. Keep hearing about Him. Keep hearing about Him. This is one of the ways that keeps us from going back and going backwards. Okay, this is exactly what he says in verse 21. If indeed you heard Him. Okay, and we're taught in Him just as truth is in Jesus. One of the best things that we can do to try and separate ourselves from everything that used to be in the past that wasn't good for us is to grow our relationship with Jesus. Go figure, right? Yeah, grow your relationship with Jesus. So the more that we continue to hear about His life and all of the different things that He taught, and the more we hear about how He died, and the more that we hear about how He gave people a chance and a shot at eternal life because He died for all of our mistakes, the more we hear about how He rose from the dead and the mission that He wants people to be a part of, and we learn the truth that is in Him, the more Jesus is brought into the picture, and we actively pursue more knowledge about Him, and we work on not just listening to Him, but listening in order to obey Him, and we actually try to practice the things that He says. This is how you begin to move forward in your walk with Him and not backwards. Okay, this is how you begin to mature and grow. When you fill your mind, you flood your mind with the things that revolve around Jesus and discipleship and the Bible and right living and right thinking. It's those things that if you just continue to hear them, well then hopefully the distance between you and the life that you used to lead, hopefully that distance becomes a lot bigger because you're getting closer to Him. Okay? I thought of this. The more we hear Jesus and we get Jesus into our minds, that's what will drive the proverbial wedge between us and the way that we shouldn't walk and the way that we shouldn't think. That is how we fight to never go back. You have got to continuously hear about Jesus. Don't stop doing that. Don't stop doing that just because maybe you're a Christian now. Don't stop doing that just because you've been a Christian 20 or 30 years. You keep hearing about Jesus. It's a lifetime. It's a lifetime. Did Jesus not say be faithful until death, right? It's an entire lifetime you'll do that. Okay? Now, I think there are some more ways that we can take from this that also helps us fight to never go back, and that would be keep laying aside the old man, the old self. This is what he says in verse 22. To lay aside, in reference to your former conduct, there's that word, former, the old man, which is being corrupted in accordance with the lust of deceit. So we've got to understand that if we don't want to go back or even get close to getting drugged back into anything that was a part of our former conduct, whatever conduct that was before Jesus, we've got to continue to throw off what we know to be wrong. What we know to not be in line with God, okay? Now, this is a really hard one. This too is really hard to do. Why? Well, because sometimes old habits die hard, don't they? Yeah, old habits die hard. Sometimes it's not exactly the easiest thing in the world to do away with something that may have been such a habit for you, or something that used to be so habitual for you. But we've got to understand that if we don't let those things go and lay them aside, hey, they can still corrupt. Okay, they can cause harm to us, ruin us, spoil us. That's really the idea. If we have anything to do with what was a part of our former way or our former behavior before we came to Christ, we've got to lay that stuff aside. Okay, whether that's what we feel like sometimes is big things, like addictions or sexual immorality or drunkenness or pornography or an unhealthy chase for money. Any of those things, or maybe even if it's what we might think of as small things, although I think all of them are kind of big things really, but things like gossip or too much pride or being overly critical or lying or anger or filthy speech, laziness, unforgiveness, any of those things, they need to be put away from us so that we can move farther and farther away from the old self and move closer to Jesus. But that right there is a fight. That's a fight because sometimes the former ways still have a pull about them that seeks to entice us. Temptations are thrown in there to try and draw you back into something you used to do or something, ways in which you used to think. And we cannot let that happen. We've got to lay those things aside in this fight. Now, how you work at doing that, how you can go about laying aside those things that corrupt, keep renewing the spirit of your mind. What we're talking about is returning to one's right senses. It's this idea of coming back to a proper state of mind. You leave behind the former ways of thinking or the worldly ways of thinking, and you start getting your mind on better ways of thinking. Paul had said this in Colossians 3:2, set your mind on the things above, not on the things that are of the earth. So you put your mind away from that which is worldly and you put it more on God's interests and things that are heavenly. So that could be with specific things of the world that your mind wants to latch onto, like all the stuff that constantly we get bombarded with. Or maybe it's just a specific kind of mentality that is kind of worldly. Okay? Whatever the case, we need to fight to renew our minds and bring our minds into a more righteous way of thinking. Okay, so if what occupies my mind is, sometimes like a selfish mentality, let's just say. A selfish mentality that only cares about my interests, okay, and what I want, but I never think about other someone else's interest in what they need. Or I don't think about the church, maybe you could go there. You don't think about the church or what's good and beneficial for the church, and I'm just all about me. Hey, I need to renew my mind. I need to renew my mind. I need to renew my mind to be a little bit more about other people, considerate of other people, or maybe a little bit more about the church or whatever. If my mind leads me to be to complain about things all the time, maybe I'm critical about things all the time, or if I'm just a Debbie Downer kind of a person, I'm a negative person all the time, I need to renew my mind. I need to try and see the positive in things. I need to not complain. I need to try and see the good in things and maybe try to see the other side to things. If my mind is always comparing with other people and what they have and what they make and the things that they get to do and the relationships that they seem to have, I need to renew my mind and put my mind more on contentment and thankfulness and recognize the good things that I still have. I need to renew that. Or maybe my mind is on material and earthly gain and progress instead of being rich in faith. I need to renew my mind and perhaps start getting a little bit more in line with the things of God and not so much in line with the things of the world. whatever it is that might be affecting your mentality, fight to put those things away and renew your mentality. Okay? And if it truly is things that are trying to draw you back into the world, look, put things in place then to where that doesn't happen as much. Right? Minimize those opportunities. Delete or limit those things. Like I don't know, if you're a reader, okay, if you're a reader, maybe read more spiritual books than you do regular books, right? Like instead of John Grisham and Jane Austen, maybe pick up a spiritual book about personal evangelism or something. Before you stone me, I don't have anything against those two authors, okay? I just thought of them. People read them, they like them, that's fine. You understand what I'm saying? Okay? If you're more of an audio person, okay, an audible person, listen to spiritual podcasts. Okay, listen to spiritual podcasts or the Bible on audio. Okay, I mean, Stuart and I were just having a conversation last week about how they've got Bibles out there. You can get Johnny Cash to read you the Bible in the King James. Do you know that? Or the other, James Earl Jones, you can have him read it to you. Wouldn't that be cool? Put your mind there, right? Put your mind on what it needs to be on. Okay, so that it helps you keep moving forward. Lay things aside and keep renewing your mind on what's better, on what's wholesome, on what's right. That is what is going to help you keep your mind focused on Jesus. It's going to help you with the fight. Now, the last thing that he says here, and I thought really kind of ends up just being a good conclusion to this, keep putting on the new man. Keep putting on the new man. He told us to lay aside the old man, and now he says you need to put on the new man. This is verse 24. Put on the new man, which in the likeness of God has been created in righteousness and holiness of the truth. You know, one of the things that sometimes is talked about among Christian circles is this idea of backsliding. Backsliding. You ever heard that term before? Backsliding? Right? This idea of falling back or sliding back into something that is not good. Right? Whether that be getting back into, sinful habits or falling into spiritual apathy or just showing more signs of spiritual immaturity. It's something that Christians fear. Or maybe they don't necessarily fear it for themselves personally, but they fear that for another Christian. Or they fear that for a new Christian. And, fearing that they would watch them slip slowly back into what they just got out of. It happens. Okay? And it's very unfortunate when it happens. Sometimes it happens and you may not realize that it happens. Okay? And if you see somebody like that and you're noticing some slipping there, hey, let's try to help them. We don't want them to go backwards. Okay, but the way that you can prevent that from happening is by continuously putting on this new person that you're supposed to be, the new creature, right? The new man, this person that continues to run from anything that has to do with the former conduct and former manner of living. You run from bad habits. You run from what tries to pull you away. And you keep trying to live and walk how God intends for us to walk, worthy of the calling. Back up to the very first verse in the chapter. Worthy of the calling which is in righteousness and holiness of the truth. You've got to continuously and consistently walk according to that standard. In this fight to never go back, I think really what the conversation ends up becoming is how to move forward. How to move forward. And ultimately how you do that is you just keep learning about Jesus. Put your mind and your eyes directly on Jesus and keep going. I tell people all the time, keep pressing on. Keep pressing on in Jesus. Okay? And the very same things that you learned about Christ, and when you learned how you needed to be if you were going to get with Christ, that's what you need to continue doing. The very same things that were going to get you away from the world and close to Jesus, you need to continue doing that. Keep doing it. Keep hearing about Him. Keep laying aside the old self, the old man. Don't let that person come back into your life. Sin wants to overtake you. You understand that? Don't let it. Keep renewing your mind. Keep your mind focused on what you need to be focused on. There's so many distractions out in the world that compete for our attention. Don't let it. Keep your focus on what's right. Keep putting on the new man. Every single day, you wake up, you keep putting on the new man, the new person, the new creature that you're supposed to be in Christ. Live up to that. That's what you're going to have to continue to do if you never want to go back. I hope that we all, if we have fallen off in some of these areas, hey, let's get back on track. Let's just get back on track, okay? Let's get back to walking the way that we should, walking in the manner worthy of the calling. Let's get back on track and get back to it. All right? Listen, if you stand in need of any help with your walk, you stand in need of anything this morning, we're here to help you. Don't be afraid to ask. Let's stand and sing.